Alright, so next up on the list, we have The Storm.
I think I had this one higher. Yeah, I had
Me
this
too.
one. I had this one actually like number 3. So I'm shocked that it's that low.
Yeah, I have it as number 3 as well.
Yeah, because I actually really appreciated how much this one had ambition. And I wrote down it would be a great theme to like a serious take on like a He-Man song. Oh, this is the
It's the orchestral.
It's the orchestral. Okay, that's why. Yeah, I was like, this sounds like a. Yeah, to me, it sounded like an 80s orchestral movie theme. And
Well, it did go
I mean,
in
that's
the 80s.
essentially what it was.
and the only reason I didn't rank this as like number 1 or number 2 was because I didn't feel like it was representative of the album as a whole. But yeah, it was definitely musically the most complex.
I mean, you could have just put it as number 1 based upon the quality, if that's how you
Nah,
felt.
I don't like doing that. That seems too fair.
It's too objective.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one, I think, is, spoilers, brilliant. Surprise, surprise. But, so Jim Steinman said that when he was a kid, he would listen to The Doors and Wagner and couldn't tell the difference between the two. And to him, it was just music. Like, rock music and classical music were equally important in his mind, and that explains why his music came out so weird. But Wagner is his hero, and he wanted to write an orchestral piece, and all of a sudden, he had all the money in the world. So he's like, I'm going to do an orchestral piece while I have the budget to do it. I'm going to write and record a piece to be performed by a full symphony because I can. And it turned out to be a great piece. I think this is an abridged cut. I think there's a moment about a minute into the song where it sounds like they cut the tape kind of sloppily. There's a crash cymbal, and it sounds like there's a cut there, and it was probably cut for length purposes to fit onto the single where it ended up.
Without the E from the team.
Right. You know, I've never heard confirmation on this, and I'm the only person I've actually heard who has that thesis or hypothesis, sorry. But I do suspect it was cut short for time purposes. But as it stands, people who have no experience with Jim Steinman, I've just played this piece for them. It's just like, hey, check out this orchestral piece. They're like, oh, cool. What composer is that? Oh, that's the I Do Anything for Love guy. Wait, what? It's even people who don't like Jim Steinman, when they just hear him as a composer for an orchestra, I think he shines. This is proof that he can do the rock stuff, but he can also shine as a classical composer. And this is the kind of thing where I could see like a Fantasia piece being done to this.
Yeah, you
think of Night on Bald Mountain, this could kind of have that same kind of vibe.
He definitely would have been a good choice to do some music composing for movies. That would have been, yeah.
I think he did do one film score in the late 70s, and then I guess one of the main themes from the score he reused, because spoilers, he reuses his songs, and that became Making Love Out of Nothing at All, which was, of course, another massive, massive hit. But yeah, I dig the hell out of this. I think this is awesome, and as someone who does rock music, but was also in an orchestra as a kid, and also writes orchestral music sometimes, I get where he's coming from, and I respect the hell out of it. I think it's rad.
So, the fact that you think there might have been a cut raises an interesting question, because this song is 2 minutes shorter than Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through. So, that means they have to have cut more than 2 minutes if they did. Or they just decided that to put a cut in for artistic reasons, that just something about the arrangement wasn't working and the piece felt like it was dragging.
It could have just been a perperformance cut. I mean, it could have been anything.
Yeah.
Well, also could have been that they cut out like 18 minutes of it. So yeah, who knows?
That's what I'm saying. Is either if there is a cut, it was either artistic or it was way more than 2 minutes.
What do you think is more likely with Jim Steinman? The reason it would be cut.
4.5 minutes is a little bit short. He probably had another 20 minutes in there.
Right, and they're just
maybe they just had to cut it there because like someone walked in while they were recording or something.
Oh, all right. All right, so
there was another monologue in the middle there.
All right, speaking of monologues, I'm going to monologue for a second here. So
are you going to rant about guitarists, Greg?
I'm going to rant specifically about a former guitarist of Steve's, who has since been fired from Lipstick. He doesn't know it yet, but
Sorry,
he's fired.
guys, I had to.
No, that's perfectly fine. So, you know how we were, for people who don't know, we did a Game of Thrones project where after each episode of Game of Thrones, we would write and record a song about the episode for the final season and release it less than 6 hours after the episode aired. So, the last song...
You insult my editing skills. It was less than 4 hours.
I don't remember the exact length, but yeah, so less than 4 hours, generally. So great job, Steve. Great job, team. And then for the last episode, Stephen Smith suggested, hey, for the last song, since we're doing an acoustic ballad, why don't we do a video for it, do it live in one take since it's not a full band production. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'll just cut this part out.
Yeah, cut this part. You'll find out later.
Editing.
Yeah.
A mystery for the ages.
Jamie's notes on this track.
I think you can all intuit what happened when we were recording the track.
Yeah, you can all guess what happened when we were recording the track and said beforehand that we were recording, and then asked if we were recording while we had guitars and microphones and were vocal harmonizing 6 minutes into the song on the 8th take. Anyway, so Jamie says, just a bit of daft musical theater, isn't it? Perfectly nice instrumental music. Doesn't really go with the rest of the album, though, is what Jamie said about The Storm.
See, I sort of feel the opposite of what Jamie and other Steve said, in that, like, conceptually, I very much get what this piece is going for with the big orchestral introduction kind of thing. And I think it fairly well succeeds in that way, but in terms of just something that I want to listen to, it doesn't really stand on its own. So, yeah, where everybody else is, like, ranking it second from the bottom because it doesn't fit into the album but stands well enough on its own, I ranked it third from the bottom because it does fit in the album but doesn't stand on its own.
Oh, we're supposed to be ranking on how much we like it?
Yes.
Just because I thought it was
We're supposed to be
pretty
ranking
good
them
doesn't mean I
for
like it.
whatever reasons we want to.
Yeah, whatever arbitrary bullshit reason you decide to rank it. That's just how the show works, Steve.
Exactly.
You've been on this show like 12 times.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
How do you not know how this works?
Doesn't mean I like it just because I think it sounds all right.
Doesn't mean I like it just because I've been here. Oh, you were talking about the song.
Oh.
Awkward.
No, this song is actually it's pretty good. Yeah, I feel like it did. What? Okay, so when you say stands on its own, do you mean as a one individual? Do you mean
as an individual piece of music?
Yeah,
so
like
do you mean
if somebody
stands out within these other frame of songs, or do you mean you could take just this one song and play it for somebody, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's awesome."
Right. No, if somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, Steve, you want to listen to The Storm?" and I'd usually be like, "No."
No, I don't want to do that either.
Okay, we're all agreed we don't want to listen to The Storm.
Okay.
Did we hear from Victor yet?
Yeah, I don't think we heard from Victor.
I want to listen to it.
Yeah, you ranked this pretty high.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. I ranked it third.
Yeah, me too.
First off, it kicks ass. If I have another genre of music that I'm allowed to like, even though I didn't say it in my introduction earlier, it would be video game scores.
Sorry,
this very specifically reminds me.
You can't like any more music.
You can't like more than one
you
thing.
can only whatever you say in a podcast. That's all you can like from there on.
All right. Damn it.
That's
why Greg has so early on been so vocal about the Beatles and Lizzie.
Yeah, he just went on and on and on.
Yeah, I keep going about like different types of music that I like. I'm breaking the rules. I'm a rebel. But you know what? Go ahead and break the rules. Tell us about video game soundtracks and how this relates, because I kind of know where you're going with this.
Oh, yeah. I gave Greg a spoiler on this one. I'm a fervent defender of the soundtrack to Final Fantasy XII, the much maligned Final Fantasy XII. I think it's good, and I think this sounds like a boss battle theme from it, which makes me like it even more.
Wait, is it Final Fantasy XII itself that's much maligned, or its soundtrack?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm... Tangents. When I first played Final Fantasy XII, I hated it because I hated the character designs, the art style, how bland it looked. I hated the music. I hated the battle system. Hated basically everything about it. And I still find most of the soundtrack to be pretty forgettable, and I'm not a fan of it because I'm a big melody guy. But I think a lot of it just comes down to how it was mixed, and I think the way they chose to orchestrate things did not allow the melodies to shine through, and so there are some very fantastic pieces from 12, including some of the boss themes. So if you lump this in with the good pieces from 12, hell yeah, right there with you. But overall, that one ranks towards the bottom for me in terms of both soundtracks and like general enjoyment of the game.
If we rank Final Fantasies by who searches, which ones get searched the most on Wikipedia, Final Fantasy XII is the 7th best.
Well, they just had a remaster come out a couple of years ago, which I would recommend the remastered soundtrack as well, as I think it is an improvement.
I would agree. But as we're talking about video game scores that only you and I know, and that the rest of the panel does not give a shit about, aside from that, like, do you think the melodies on this track are strong then, or do you think it's a little bit more atmospheric? What's your take on this as an orchestral piece? Since we're probably, Mike, do you listen to orchestral music? I know that the Steves don't.
Certainly not listening to 300 minutes of Final Fantasy XII orchestral music anytime soon.
I have no agenda against orchestral music, but it's really not something I spend any of my own time like sitting down listening to.
I like it that you say agenda, as if like there are people out there. They're like, we gotta take down that orchestral.
I mean, there is music out there that like I pretty much straight up hate and like want to eradicate from the earth. But orchestral music is not one of those musics.
All right, so
I do like the Storm. I had it near the bottom just because, I mean, we're kind of like ranking a rock album with more rock style-esque songs or whatever, and in that context, I think it's low, but it's certainly a well-performed, entertaining piece to listen to. And while I really respect instrumentals and everything, for the most part, they end up at or near the bottom if I'm ranking a traditional style rock album where the other songs are like a more common rock format with, verse, chorus, etc.
What does the Storm offer horny teenage Mike?
I mean,
wetness.
Yeah, there was plenty of self-induced storms in my teenage years,
Oh. But I want to get back to Victor. So you listen to a decent amount of orchestral music. I mean, I know you and I both like video game scores. I assume you also enjoy classical music like I do. So this meets the cut. This is up there with other stuff you listen to?
I would say I bring up 12 specifically because, at least in the Final Fantasies, it does stick out as not being as melodically strong, even as like 15 sort of brings the strong melodies back. We can debate that another time or right now. And
I think the strong melodies are on 13 and 15. Hashtag hot takes.
I would agree. 13
oh hell yeah, dude! Virtual high five. I'm doing I did the devil horns when you were saying that this song rocks. So like we're on the same page.
Hot takes.
My precious head.
Can I make a comment, which is that if anybody's listening to this podcast because they like Jim Steinman, they're probably not going to like Final Fantasy that much. I don't see that much overlap.
You mean really? These albums with epic fantasy covers and like I think one he's literally fighting a giant fire-breathing monster with a sword?
I don't know.
I can't see why a Final Fantasy fan would think that's cool.
Steve, do you not realize that the target audience of this particular episode of the podcast is Greg and Jim Steinman?
Okay.
I bet Jim Steinman likes Final Fantasy.
I'm sure Carla plays JRPGs all the time. She's like, Dragon Quest is my shit. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off, but I want to hear more of your opinion on this because I think you probably have the most experience with this kind of music other than myself.
I bring up 12 specifically because it does stick out as being less melodically like overt. And the thing that I like about when you do pick out a melody in 12 is that when you start hearing it in the loop, it's like such a high point in each one. And then eventually that sort of like opens up to where you start hearing the melody all the way through, if there is one, which I'll admit there isn't always. But this feels like one where it's kind of, instead of having one instrument that plays like say 8 measures of melody, it feels like there's one instrument that'll go for a measure and then it'll instantly pass off to something else, or it'll be like it just sort of a big orchestral wash for a while that is kind of, imitating in the way that a symphony might, imitating a storm, which I imagine was the intention. But it sort of matches that. And I wish I had a better track to compare it to, because this is on 12, but it was originally on 5. But the battle at the big bridge,
The Gilgamesh battle?
yeah,
You
it
know,
reminds me of that.
For podcast listeners out there who don't know the piece, I don't really see it, but hey, that's cool that you do. The thing that I would say about this piece in particular, I think it really feels like a very traditional orchestral piece. And I remember when I had someone listen to it who didn't even know the name of the piece, said, "Oh, this sounds like a storm." So it's succeeded with its desired atmosphere. And if you think about this album with its intended placement, the fact that the storm leads into Bad for Good, like those two are a very excellent 1-2 punch. And then when the lyrics in Bad for Good reference the storm, it's like, oh yeah, it's calling back to that last track, and it makes the album feel like a really cohesive experience. So when it's a bonus track you listen to towards the end, it might feel out of place, but when it's the 1-2 punch of the storm into Bad for Good, which is how we did it live, I think this is a fantastic, standout, S-rank, perfect composition. No complaints from me.
See, the trick is, by never listening to the bonus disc, you can hide away forever from the storm. But if you're listening to the rest of the album, you really can't hide from Jim.
It's true.
Isn't it interesting how you can hear the decade in recorded music? Because listening to it, I didn't know when this was recorded. I was assuming the 70s, and this made me think so much of 80s movies. But then I looked, and it was from 81-ish, isn't that around there?
It is 81.
And it's just crazy because it feels so much like the 80s.
But also you thought it felt like the 70s simultaneously.
No, I assumed it was from the 70s because I think that's what I thought when Jim Steinman was popular. So I just assumed it was the 70s, but I was like, it feels like the 80s, and it was. It has all those motifs of like the soundtracks to 80s movies.
And Steve, when he first heard this, he thought it was a 70s album. Other Steve.
And also
Steve.
when he was thirsting.
When he was thirsting.
When I was thirsty for blood, tons to vampiring and whatnot.
But yeah,
one of the things I love about music in general is just like the study of it, which is why I do nerdy things like music podcasts like this. But when you have, you always have like carryover. So like early 80s still has late 70s elements, and there's like early 90s music that still sounds very much like 80s music and so on. So I easily see both sides of that argument, where there's 70s aspects and certainly 80s aspects as well.
The 70s aspect is that all of these songs were written by 1978.
Right. But also, I think the guitar tone is, I think, the most 80s thing about the album. It definitely has a very early 80s guitar tone where it's not quite as heavy as Survivor, but not quite as new wavy as The Cars, like somewhere in between.
Well, and I was talking strictly about the orchestral piece because it doesn't have any of those distinguishing elements. Like, you can listen to recorded music and hear the guitar sounds and pinpoint it, but with something that's just orchestral, that's not as easy to do, but it still had that 80s feel to it, which I thought was very, very unique just from a listener perspective.
This would go well in Conan the Barbarian.
Well, yeah, I just kept thinking of Masters of the Universe, and maybe it's the cover as it had that thinking in my head too, but I was like, oh, this would work for a Dolph Lundgren He-Man movie.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of you guys say it could have sounds like it could have come from the 70s. Some say it sounds like the 80s, and I think it sounds like a video game soundtrack from 2006.
And I think it sounds like, a Wagnerian piece. So like 100 years before that. So we're all wrong. Is what it comes down to. All of us are wrong about this except for Jim Steinman. Any other comments on The Storm before we move on?
Nope.
That was like a pleasantly surprising round. I appreciate how well we were able to analyze that orchestral piece. Next up on the list, we have my favorite ballad on the album. We have Surf's Up next on the list.
Yeah, I'm just going to come right out and say this one doesn't really work for me. I had it last in my ranking. And this is where I'm worried about kind of being a dick, depending on who listens to this. But the weird thing to me is that Jim Steinman gets a lot of grief as a singer, and so Rory Dodd sings on some of the songs, and on these songs, and in general, I think he has a great voice. But on this song, I just kind of think he sounds like a little wimp. Like he's not selling me on it. Like at that point, I just would have rather had Jim sing it. Like I don't know.
Is this Rory?
This is
Rory singing.
Oh, because I had no idea. Yeah, because I had my main point for this song is that it's let down by his vocalist. The song is too big for the vocal.
It's not just me. So like he's supposed to be the better singer, and probably in general he is, but for some reason his vocal is just not doing it for me on the song, and the song in general just doesn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, I don't hate it, but yeah, that vocal just kind of grates on me, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about that. So sorry, Rory, if you listen to this. In general, you are an underrated singer, and I respect your work.
But in this case, he thinks you're overrated.
All right, so I'm gonna let someone else go. I'm gonna go last on this one since I probably like it the best. Victor, how about you go on Surf's Up? What's your thoughts on this one?
Okay, I'm looking at my list, and I think technically this is my favorite ballad on here as well. My only note is I think the refrain "Surf's Up and so am I" might be the dumbest thing on this album, and I love it.
It's kind of that's the boner joke.
So actually, I ranked this one the highest, and it weirds me out a little bit in that if I'm like pondering these songs, I'm like, okay, the dumb surfing boner joke song, that's got to be near the bottom. And then I'm like looking at my list, I'm like, oh no, right, I put it at third because like it's got this kind of great prog structure where it builds in the way that the best Jim Steinman songs do, and like it's got a bunch of falsetto vocals, which I'm a huge fan of. So I'm like, oh, like these lyrics are so incredibly dumb, but man, is this song good though.
Can you tell me what the song? So what's the main lyric about? Like what is the song trying to? You're
on the beach with your girl and you want to have sex with her because you're horny.
Oh, okay, all right. Tale is old.
Tale is old.
Tale is old as beaches.
Yeah.
Tale is old as sand.
All right, I'm going to read Jamie's notes first just so I can go into full attack mode on this song. So Jamie said, well, that intro is not what I'd envisioned when I saw the song title. Another of my, this song reminds me of Elton John and Billy Joel, who I love. Steinman's voice is superb again here, not Jim Steinman. Can leave those little sound effects during the first verse. Sparse tambourines in the second verse are lovely. As he reaches the upper of his range, it falls back into the, this is a great song, but would have been better in a lower key, sung by Meatloaf.
Slash sung by Meatloaf. So probably either or.
Love the daft lyric of Surf's Up and so am I, so another approval of that lyric. Something I've grown to associate with Jim Steinman. The Meatloaf version from Bad Attitude demonstrates how while the vocal performance may be better, the arrangement/production is just as key, as the production and the arrangement of the original is so much stronger.
Oh, there's a Meatloaf version of this?
There's Meatloaf versions of basically every song on this album.
Oh, is that what you were saying earlier about there's a Meatloaf version of every song?
Pretty much. So the thing with Meatloaf is he does a really good job of pillaging the Jim Steinman catalog, where it's like, oh, it's been a while since Jim wrote a new song for me. Let me cover a song of his that wasn't a hit and see if I can make it a hit while he's not looking. He's done it many a time. So most of this album, you could do a one-for-one Meatloaf cover version. So we could do Fake Bad for Good. So
I got
except for The Storm.
I got a question.
No, The Storm is at the beginning of Seize the Night.
Did Meatloaf ever do any records that Jim Steinman wasn't the writer on?
A bunch.
Okay.
Those tend to be
that's
not as good.
But that's interesting, though, because what I know from Meatloaf, which isn't much, I just know the big songs, is that his sound is so intertwined with apparently what Jim Steinman does. So on his other songs, are they emulating that same kind of style, or is it just completely different?
So here, usually he has two modes. If he's not working with Steinman, he does what I call fake Jim Steinman, which we mentioned on the Fake Psycho Circus podcast, where he desperately tries to sound as much like Jim Steinman as possible and gets really competent songwriters to do it. So like Diane Warren, Desmond Child, the people who wrote the Sesame Street songs.
Naturally.
And Nikki Sixx and James Michael.
Won't you tell me how to get Sesame Street.
And so when he does fake Jim Steinman, he tends to do pretty well, and then he'll try to go as far away from that sound as possible and try to differentiate himself and do something different, and that's usually terrible. And it's like, I'm going to rap now. So it's like, it's either one or the other. It's either do your best to imitate Jim Steinman and hire people who can do it, or just bad, awkward, like not knowing what he wants to sound like. And there's usually like no in between. Sometimes there's stuff like Blind Before I Stop, which is like, yeah, this is just a cool 80s rock song. Awesome. But for the most part, it's Jim Steinman songs, fake Jim Steinman songs, or shite.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't know any other person that's like that, vocalist, because Meatloaf is not a writer. He's someone who's a very good vocalist, but he does
He's
things
a vessel.
He pumps the blood through the body. He doesn't. He's the vein. And
that's kind of, if you look at Jim Steinman's career, like his, what I call quote unquote puppet artists all kind of do that. Like if you listen to Bonnie Tyler songs written by Steinman, they very much have that Meatloaf sound. If you listen to It's All Coming Back to Me Now, it has that Meatloaf sound.
Absolutely.
So like Steinman distinctly has his sound.
So that's what I was getting towards. So all these other vocalists, pretty much everyone in country music or pop music, they don't write their own things, but they can have 47 writers per song, and they can have different people, and it all ends up sounding like that because that's sort of the style. But for a Meatloaf to have gone with Jim Steinman because it's so different, it's a very weird thing that you're not involved in the creative process at all, but you have this unique style that you can't replicate on your own with another person. It's unique. And I find that interesting.
Well, he's done a very good job of replicating it at times. I've often said that Blind as a Bat is one of the best Jim Steinman songs ever written.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the best team of fake Jim Steinman is definitely James Michael and Nikki Sixx. Like, the Couldn't Have Said It Better album is fantastic. Bad Attitude is also great. Like, he's done some very good fake Jim Steinman work over the course of his career. And, Surf's Up from Bad Attitude, the way that he covered it on that album, getting back into this song, he did like a little bit more of like a traditional like rock power ballad, and he delivers a great vocal on the track, and it's a very, very good version. I do like it a lot, but I think what Jamie was saying about the arrangement being so important on this track, I think rings true. I think as far as like Jim Steinman piano riffs and just the piano parts, This is one of my favorites. I just adore the way the pianos and vocals work together melody-wise in this track. I just think it's phenomenal. I think it's stunning. I love the phrasing and just like how staccato the vocal is when Rory gets, high up there in the pre-chorus. I just love the staccato melody, and I've written so many songs that, most of which haven't seen the light of day, but I wrote so many songs like this in high school, where I wrote one really ridiculous ballad called Thinking with the Wrong Head, because I'm like, well, it's a Steinman-esque song, and it has to have a boner joke. And the thing is, every girl I played it for thought it was super deep, and I'm just like, this song just is a dick joke. But when wrapped around a pretty piano ballad, they're like, oh, that's so deep, that's so beautiful. But I think Rory's vocal is great. It's emotive. It's my favorite Rory vocal on the album. I think my favorite Rory Dodd vocal, period.
Oh, damn.
I love just, he is really belting it and really going up there in his register, and I think it's succeeding very well. Once again, the Meatloaf version is really good, and I do love that quite a bit. But for me, like, the arrangement is what makes this the definitive version of the song. Just the way the drums come in, the tone of the guitars, the mandolin at the end, but especially just like the phrasing, the way that Rory handles the phrasing on the song, and just the staccato nature is absolute perfection for me. So I adore this track.
So now you're gonna get into your opinions about it, right?
I guess just to clarify, to be a little bit fair, I mean, I'm not saying the whole entire vocal is a shit show. There's clearly,
most of it is, yeah.
I guess more specifically, there's clearly parts on the song where he has a very pleasant voice and everything. I guess whereas some of those reaches are totally working for Greg, I would say those aren't reaching for me, aren't working for me, and those are some of the spots where he kind of loses me, and
Agree.
almost just kind of sounds weak, and it just isn't as effective for me. So
I don't know, when he's singing how hard, and then, later singing Surf's Up and So Am I, man, that is a great build-up to an erection right there. That's fantastic. Great job, Rory, just, really making that boner felt through the music.
Well, we're not trying to say that his voice doesn't give boners. We're just saying that maybe with Meatloaf, he would have a little bit more.
Well, that's because there's just more body.
Right, more cushion for the pushing, really.
Rory Dodd gives you that chub, but
Meatloaf is a full-on. He's a rager, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, just
there you go. I can live with
I
that.
got a raging meatloaf.
I just love the atmosphere this song builds. The sky is trembling and the moon is pale. We're on the edge of forever and we're never gonna fail. Man, just that teen passion is just coming across in the song, and it's the line, I want to take your hand and make it good and make it right. Just so many great lines in this song. I love it. I love it.
Which is what really surprises me about
the chorus.
Mike not being into this song is that I feel like we're in some kind of bizarro world where I'm super into the horny teenager song and Mike's like, this just doesn't do it for me.
I guess, you know what, and also that's a great point. And I was like, whoa, how can that be? I guess it's maybe a little too delicate for that, whereas I like my horniness a little more yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that might be it. That's probably why.
So Mike's really into horny teenagers, is that what you're saying?
So what Mike is saying is that if this song was sung by Paul Stanley in 1993...
I mean, I wouldn't be on this podcast because I would just be jizzing all the time.
Since the 90s.
He would he would no longer be an active participant in society. He would just be listening to Surf's Up on loop and be like, oh, Paul Stanley's so good. 1993, Paul.
Yeah, I would just have an IV to keep me hydrated. It would be great. Yeah.
It'd be great.
Mr. and Mrs. Walsh, we found your son just dead of dehydration in his apartment. Just surrounded by so much ejaculate and with Paul Stanley CD on loop in the background.
That's the song we were missing on Revenge, dude. When they said they were going to work with Jim Steinman and then didn't.
It was just the Surf's Up redo. Yeah,
it was just a Surf's Up cover.
I would love for the Paul Stanley vault to contain his version of Surf's Up. I would get behind that.
But then you'd never leave your house.
Yeah, so I need it to be once I'm on hospice care, and then I'm let me hear it.
You're on your deathbed, be like, it's time, play me the song. This is exactly what I wanted, I can die now.
And you know what that song's about, right? If Paul Stanley's singing it?
Oh, do I need to hit the button?
Yes.
And it's about Paul Stanley's dick. Now this girl's gonna get some of his dick.
That's right. Oh man, if Jim, Rory, and Carla listen to this, I wonder what they're gonna think. Any other comments on Surf's Up before we move on, or just me awkwardly ending my friendships?
Nope. End them, baby.
And so am I.
All right. Next up on the list, we have the song I ranked as second best on the album. We've got Dance in My Pants.
Wow. It's only this far up, huh? It was my number one.
The thing is, this is a very swingy panel.
It's true, it is.
Yeah.
All the Steves and Jamie put it middle low.
I'm saying that there's a lot of people. There's a lot of diversity in the ranking. So someone will rank a song at the top, and then someone will rank it towards the bottom. It's it's all over the place. Opinions on this album. There's not a real big consensus.
Yeah, I mean,
overall.
I put it on number 4. I thought
you covered it.
Yeah, I just can't get over the cheesy lyrics, man.
Did you put it at 4 or 6?
4.
Oh, I'm looking at Mike.
I put it at 4.
My bad.
It's just lyrical I actually did pay attention to the lyrics of this one. And
after you missed the one, you were like, oh shoot, I'm supposed to pay attention to this.
Because it sounded like the oral version of Dirty Dancing. It was not really. Musically, I find it more interesting, and it ranks so high for me because of the vocal here, because it's the best vocal performance on the record as far as I'm concerned. I think.
Yeah, Carla's amazing.
Yeah,
for sure. Carla's her name.
Yes.
She's so great.
No, she is a
Wait, what?
phenomenal vocalist, Carla
I don't
DeVito.
understand. Who's Carla? Because I thought Dance in My Pants was a duet between Jim and Rory.
No. This is Carla.
It's a duet
Yes,
between Greg and his pants. He loves it so much.
It's a duet between Jim Steinman and Carla DeVito, who was the touring vocalist on the Bad Out of Hell tour, but she wasn't on the original album, so she's not the singer on Paradise by the Dashboard Light. But she's a phenomenal singer, and it is so great that she got to sing a really fun, epic duet with Jim Steinman. She is my favorite female vocalist that has worked with Steinman throughout his career. And she's just absolutely phenomenal on this cut. And, as you're talking about lyrics, I think there are some great lyrics. The goofy lyric of "I'm a lover, not a dancer. Don't want to be on my feet when I can be on my back. Don't want to be on the floor when I can be in the sack." Man,
Oh my God.
if you're
It's
a dude,
so funny.
if you're a
It's
dude
so
and your
great.
girlfriend wants to go out dancing with you, and you're just like, "But babe, we could just stay home and have sex. Isn't that more awesome?"
and he's trying to hide it like I'm a lover. Not like because he couldn't say
he's
I'm a
trying to say it in
fucker.
a nice way, like, I just think dancing kind of sucks. Can we just bone instead? Like, if Paradise by the Dashboard Light is horny teenagers, this is like horny people in their like early 20s in a relationship and be like, "Oh, my girlfriend just wants to go out dancing and I just want to bone right now."
Oh, my girlfriend expects me to do things and not just be a total tool.
Right.
I am
That's the
amused at
worst.
how bad of a boyfriend he is in this song.
yeah.
No, that's why it's
so
hilarious.
It's so great.
But it's like sincerely, the line, "I don't ever want to be rescued. I don't ever want to be saved. I got a feeling that I'm going to be alive forever, dancing on the edge of a grave." Like that's just a cool line. Like that just it gets me pumped. It makes me inspired. Tale of Gilgamesh, trying to get immortality and not succeeding, but damn it, you're gonna try and sing a fun song with Carla DeVito while you do it.
So what is it that makes him feel like he's gonna be alive forever? Is it dancing or is it sex?
Both.
Okay.
Because by the end of the song, he learns that dancing can be fun. Dancing and sex are both fun. You can enjoy both.
At the same time?
Sure.
All right.
But he
Kind of sounds
one
like
is
it.
often euphemistic for the other.
But the arc of the song is Carla DeVito wants to go dancing. Jim Steinman doesn't want to go. He just wants to have sex. And then Carla convinces him that dancing can be fun. And then he dances and has a great time. And they're just dancing. And then they probably bone later. And that's a great story.
It is the greatest story of all time, I gotta say.
So does she convince him that he likes dancing by just doing moves before they leave the house?
Yes.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I would say the video for this song, overall, I don't like the music videos from this album. The music video for this is tremendous. You can't find it on YouTube, but it's on Vimeo and on Jim Steinman's website. Carla looks hot in the video. I'll just call it out. She looks freaking great.
What about Jim? Does he look hot?
Jim looks just as hot. They're both hot. Hot power couple.
You know how he looks in the
It's
cover
great.
with the wings and
Yeah.
no clothes?
I have
Look,
no idea.
I'm just saying.
I have no idea what Jim Steinman looks like.
You have a record with the painting of him right next to you.
Seeing that as a teenager, that, if hormones were not awoken before then, hormones would definitely be, awoken by the end of watching that video. God damn! But it's fun, it's silly, but it works on all levels. It's a really enjoyable performance, and it's a fun back and forth. Elephant in the room. I know a lot of people have criticized this song as just trying to be Paradise by the Dashboard Light. I don't necessarily agree with that, because Dead Ringer for Love, in my opinion, is much more a stand-in for Paradise by the Dashboard Light, because the characters are largely in the same place. Where in Paradise by the Dashboard Light and Dead Ringer for Love, it's both the guy just trying to get with the girl and the girl sort of the back and forth. There is that aspect there, but then you throw in the aspect of dancing. Completely changes the narrative. Because you don't know whether or not they bone at the end of this song. You know that they bone in Paradise, and you know that they bone in Dead Ringer for Love, but this song, he might just be really tired after dancing and just, go to bed. You don't know. It's a mystery ending.
I feel like there's a terrible mystery, because, they'll get around to it.
Yeah, they'll get around to it. But we keep cutting off Victor, who has high praise for this song, ranking it as number 1. I want to hear you talk about the song, because you had not heard any of these songs before. And you seem to like this one quite a bit.
This is one that I knew was in contention for number one from the very beginning of listening to the album. And I wanted to, while we were talking about important lyrics, which that one you quoted was great, but how could you omit, oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
Okay.
My favorite lyric on the whole album.
That's pretty good impersonation. I like it.
Somebody needs to do an edit where
Thank you.
they
I'll have
insert those lines into Respect by Pantera, because I feel like that would work much better.
So I mean, their chemistry is amazing. She's an amazing singing voice and like an amazing monologuing voice. I would love to hear her do Love and Death and an American Guitar. This one is like, if there's elements from some of the songs that I like or like a little less throughout the album, this has all of the good ones and none of the bad ones. Except even the bad ones, which is maybe the cheesiness of the lyrics, are amazing because they're just so into it.
Yeah, I mean, and this song, playing it live was just such a phenomenal experience for me. There's a friend of ours named Morgan Bosman who is a phenomenal singer, and I remember the first time I saw her perform, I was like, oh my god, I finally found a woman who can do Steinman vocals. And we became really good friends. We're still very good friends to this day. I just, had a nice chat with her on the phone yesterday. Really sweet girl, love her to death. And she freaking nailed this song when we did it live. And like we kind of brought the roof down when we did Dance in My Pants. Like that got
Hell
a really good reception. Doing a duet is just, I had a lot of fun with it. Joe from Ultima Final Fantasy finally listened to this album today and gave me his review of it, which we'll play on the next Jim Steinman episode in our multi-part epic. But he said that this was the worst song he had ever heard in his entire life.
Oh my god, hell yeah.
But you know what that means? That means the troll was successful. Like, this is a troll song. This is 100% a troll song. And if you enjoy it, you just have a high enough troll power level to get past it. You're just like, I know exactly what you're doing, and I love every second of it. So your appreciation of it, I just know you have a high troll power level. You're just like, yeah, this is amazing troll music. It's phenomenal. Like, what's not to love?
It's great.
Mike, did we get your thoughts on this one?
No, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I did have it fourth from the bottom. It's a fun song. I have nothing against it. I guess it's just a little more like it could be in Grease for me, and nothing against that. That just doesn't slam me as much as some of the little more rockin' songs on the album. I do kind of see I've heard before many years ago, probably before you even knew this album, Greg, the comparison to Paradise by the Dashboard Light. So I get that. It's mostly the male and female thing and everything.
You can't do more than one duet in your career.
It's true.
Well, it's a little bit more.
Tell me more. Did you dance in your pants?
I mean, it's totally what it is. Could easily be in a Grease movie or something like that. It's fun. And Greg, what you were saying about you getting to do it with that girl and bringing the house down, I can totally see that. In the right environment and everything, this totally seems like a crowd-pleasing song. Just in context of the album and everything, while I enjoy it, there's just... 6 other songs I enjoy more on the album, and that's all.
So Jamie's comments on the track, the follow-up to Paradise, ? At first I thought, if I didn't know Paradise by the Dashboard Light, I'd probably really like this. But then I heard the horn arrangement and realized I wouldn't either way. Just falls quite flat. I'm not sure if it sounds like a forced male-female trade-off, but something about the track just leaves me feeling cold. I love the synth in the middle section. Even though I love the synth in the middle section, it couldn't rescue it. I think this is the track that they probably had the most fun recording on the album. This 100%. Is the one where just everyone just seems like they're having a great time. They're partying in the studio. I think this, like when people say the song feels forced, I don't agree at all. It feels like joy in musical form, having fun, going over the top, and just having a blast while doing it. And I remember just being super goofy with my bassist in high school and just blasting this really loud in his basement and dancing like a bunch of nerds. And they're like, okay, we should probably practice our songs now. But like this this just brings me so much joy. I love this track. S rank, perfection. And just like Victor said, the chemistry between the two of them, like it is great. And I'm just so glad we have Carla doing a lead vocal on a song like this in the Jim Steinman catalog. And I do have her first solo album. It's really awesome too. Great stuff on there, but it's really nice to hear her belt out some Steinman.
I guess one quick thing that came to mind, like we talk about how Jim Steinman likes to work in little jokes and just that weird sense of humor and stuff. Years ago when I discovered this album, I just remember getting a little chuckle even out of the title just because like the phrase, you got ants in your pants just seems like such a grandma thing to say, like to a fidgety little kid. Just the fact that Jim was like, you know what, I need to take that grandma saying, ants in your pants, and make it a song, dance in my pants. And I don't know, to teenage me, that was just like a quirky, whimsical thing to do and really characteristic of him.
Yeah, I feel like that it sounds simultaneously like this whole song sounds like a little kid and like a really old man somehow.
The duet between small child Jim and Grandma Carla.
You mean this is Benjamin Button?
Yeah,
I was born under unusual circumstances.
It sounds like he wrote this when he was below 15 and when he was over 65.
Like he finally got
nowhere in
it
between. Yeah.
Like started when he was 12 and turned 75. Like, shit, I should get around to finish that song. I need to finish that song. Not just pure musical joy. One of the few songs that Meatloaf did not cover on an album. He did it live before Bad Out of Hell 2 when he was starting to work with Steinman again, but never did it on an album. So one of the few.
Did he do all the vocal on it?
No, he did a duet.
Okay.
Live
With himself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and he would do like the make out with himself thing that Paul Stanley does. So, yeah, very very hot.
He did like the hand face thing.
Yep.
We're gonna dance in my pants.
It's giving me a Meatloaf right now.
Dude,
just thinking about it.
Dude, I'm so loafing right now.
But just to touch once again on the dance in my pants thing.
Oh god.
Steve Smith, we're both into bad puns.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Steinman also being into bad puns, like right up my alley. Like hell yeah, dude! You could write Dragon Ball character names with these kind of puns. Hell yeah, brother.
Danzig My Pants is just like the shirtless dude with black hair. He's really into punk rock and puns.
You know what? I would love to hear Danzig cover this song. That'd be amazing. Cover this song, do a duet with Morrissey.
I'm a lover, not a dancer. Yeah, actually, that sounds pretty great. They could schedule live performances and then just not show up.
Right. Any other
I got dance in my pants. That's the Morrissey half.
Right.
He's playing her.
He's
playing her.
I like dude, if I could hear Morrissey do this song, I actually might like it.
So any other comments on the Morrissey version of Dance in My Pants?
I want to hear it.
The reason he doesn't want to leave the house is just because he's sad, though.
Yeah.
Also, there might be meat products at the dance hall.
He's not leaving though. He's not showing up. Don't count on him to show up.
But he will stay on his back because he's depressed.
Please, please, please let me dance in my pants.
Next
up on the list we have Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through.
What? Which number is this?
Too low.
Like 4?
Really?
Yeah, we've got 4 ahead of this.
I had this one as number 1.
Way too high.
Great song.
Divisive.
No.
I put this at number 2. It's a Stone Cold classic.
Number 2 is where it belongs.
I put it right in the middle, but I love every song on this album.
Wait, when you say
Put it in the middle, you're a terrorist.
hang on,
Do you like this album?
Wait, other Steve, when you say it's a classic, had you heard it before?
Yes, covered by tons of people.
Oh, really?
This
I've never heard it.
Probably one of the first Steinman songs I ever heard was, at least the first one that I explicitly remember hearing, is like going to some sort of musical positivity show as a small child called Up With People. And this was what they closed the show with. It's like this very diverse group of, of dancers jumping around and singing Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through.
That's pretty cool. Maybe the song was bigger in Canada or something. Like
I think I was in the States by this point.
Oh, okay.
No,
well, then
it was still bigger in Canada.
that's cool though, just because I mean I knew the Meatloaf version first, and then heard this one. But other than that, I have never heard it really outside of those two contexts.
Yes.
Although Up With People's from Colorado, maybe we were in Canada when I saw them.
Yeah, I feel like this song, it definitely sounds like the climax to the record, and it does feel indicative of the whole message that Steinman's trying to get out. Like, it feels very much like one of his songs, and it's one of his better songs, which is why I ranked it as number one. It may not have the best hook, but overall, it kind of hits on all the marks. It's not overly long, and it's not as repetitive as some of the other ones, but it still has enough originality to make it listenable again.
And
times.
this was also the single, and I think this was actually hit 41 on the charts, I think. So
just missed the top 40.
Yeah, I think it just barely missed the top 40. The Jim Steinman version of the song. I think the Meatloaf one was a bigger hit, but I think it's a phenomenal song. It's about the magic and wonder that is rock and roll, and just sincerely loving music. And Jim Steinman has said that the way he writes songs, his ideal fan is like a kid. He would call it the kid in Kansas, a kid, in the heartland of America, listening to the music, with the covers pulled over his head, listening to the radio, trying to be quiet so it doesn't wake his parents, and just falling in love with the magic and beauty of rock and roll. He said that was his ideal fan, and that was who he was writing for. And I think that's a very cool thing because, in many ways, I was that fan who fell in love with the power and magic and beauty of all things that is rock. The majesty of rock. The mystery of roll.
It's a different band, Greg. This one hit 32 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100.
Oh, so yeah, this was a top.
Really?
This was a top
40
40.
classic.
Yeah,
I did not know it did that well. This is not stuck around to rock radio, which is very unfortunate.
No, I've never heard it on a...
But yeah, just like, some of these lines I want to touch on. We be listening to the radio so loud and so strong. Every golden nugget coming like a gift of the gods. Someone must have blessed us when he gave us those songs. That is just such sincere appreciation and love of music. The line, there's always something magic, always something new. And when you really need it the most, that's when rock and roll dreams come through. The beat is yours forever. The beat is always new. Like, it's a love song to music. And it is completely sincere. And
nary a dick joke to be found.
Nary a dick joke to be found. There is a gripe I do have with this song and the way it was marketed. When they did music videos and Top the Pops for it, Rory Dodd is clearly the singer on the track. But when they would lip sync it live for Top of the Pops and for the music video, they had Jim Steinman do the lip syncing.
Lip syncing live.
That was just payback for Surf's Up.
Well, I think that's just, look, at Top of the Pops, everyone lip syncs on Top of the Pops. That's just how the program is done. So I'm not going to criticize someone for lip syncing on Top of the Pops. That's just what they do on that show. What I suspect probably happened was they wanted to simplify things for marketing's sake. It's hard to explain, hey, here's an album by Jim Steinman. Jim Steinman isn't singing this song. That probably they thought would confuse the listening public. And so even though Jim wanted to have multiple vocalists to fulfill his musical vision when he wasn't able to, I think it is very unfortunate that in the marketing for this, Rory was pushed to the side and Jim had to pretend he was singing it, and I think he was uncomfortable with it too. And I think that's an unfortunate marketing thing, but I think the actual recording itself, the sincerity of the piece, the bitchin' saxophone solo, I think the wonderful a cappella at the end, I think it is another phenomenal standout cut. Victor, why do you hate it?
To me, my main comment is, of all of the songs on this album, this sounds the least likely to be the last song. Aside from the actual literal, just it kind of keeps going after the song is over. But it doesn't, I would have assumed that maybe Bad for Good was the last song, or one of the more consistently epic ones. I don't know. This one just didn't do it for me, and it's possible it's because it was track 10 of 10,000.
So it was like, it was too mellow to be like, this is the epic conclusion of the album. This is how we're going. Like, we had all these big bombastic epics, and then this is just more like tender and sweet.
Yeah, and maybe that's just a fault of me for having like whatever preconceived notions I might have about this kind of general style. But that's just kind of how it landed for me. Just not my favorite.
I think I will concede that as a valid way to. I personally think it's a great epilogue for the album, a great final track. But Bat Out of Hell 2 ends with Lost Boys and Golden Girls, Meatloaf covering that song. And that is a really weird way to end out that album. It feels like it's a great version, but ending with Lost Boys and Golden Girls, like that is in my opinion, a much weirder track to end on. Feels
yeah,
very
that would be
awkward
weird.
After such a bombastic album. And though it's a great version, it's just like, why did you close the album with this? At least this one being a love letter to music, being a love letter to the majesty of music, it makes thematic sense. If it makes less musical sense, thematically, I think this is a very phenomenal closer for the album. And
it's a coherent coda to have, you know that all that rock music you just listened to, this is what it's all about.
Yeah,
and
I'll give
even
you that.
Steve Edwards was favorable towards it, so that's impressive.
I know.
It just didn't strike me right, and I think part of it is it's the last track on a pretty long album.
I mean, I felt that way too. I wanted it to be over with, but it was still one of. I think because it was the last song, I could appreciate it more as a closer instead of like the second to last track. Which is the second last? What song is the second last track?
Canonically, Left in the Dark.
Oh yeah, that one sucked. Kind of. Sorry. That sounded harsh.
But on the version you were listening to, it would have been The Storm. Would have been the second to last.
Oh. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about. I think. Hang on, let me look at my list.
The Storm is the orchestral one. Left in the Dark.
Oh no, I'm confused. Yeah, okay, yeah, the medley one. Yeah, that was my second last one. Yeah, that was by far my least.
That one
favorite.
wasn't medley at all.
Yeah, that was by far my least favorite of all the songs. So yeah,
I would agree.
After hearing that one, and then you get this, I was like, okay, well that's cool. It's going. And maybe the reason why I thought this was the best song on the album is because it did follow the worst song on the album.
Yeah, and I think for me, the worst song on the album just put me in like a less excited mood to hear more.
Less charitable mood.
Yeah, I think that's what happened for me.
That makes sense too, yeah.
But I mean, you're favorable towards it, and hey, this was a top 40 hit, so they clearly picked the right single, at least for some of the people.
I think so. Yeah, I think for the general, because I would say I'm just a general listener with this kind of music. Yeah, and so yeah, definitely picked the right song.
So I want to get Jamie's comments, and then we're gonna move over to Mike. Jamie said, "It's a fine song. Almost sounds Dire Straits-esque with the piano lines. Reminds me a lot of Tunnel of Love's piano stylings. Seems disjointed to the rest of the album. Just doesn't drive as hard as the other songs. Perhaps it's the sequencing at this point in the album after the instrumental that's quite odd to me.
Whoops.
However, I am very fond of the fake fade out to a cappella fade in. Another Steinman song I was aware of in the Meatloaf form from Bat 2 with the awesome, all caps, fretless bass and overall better production and performance. I think this is much better performance-wise than the Meatloaf version. There are a couple tracks on the album where I think it's a much closer call. I think honestly Surf's Up is a closer call in terms of the Meatloaf version versus the Bad for Good version. But this one, the Bad for Good version, is the clear winner for me, and it's one of the easiest ones for me to decide which version I prefer, the Jim Steinman original or the Meatloaf cover. Which, to credit Meatloaf, Jim did produce that album and was involved in the arrangements and all that stuff, so it's harder to call it a complete cover necessarily when Jim's like the one telling him, hey, sing this.
Do that thing that Rory did.
But Mike, you seem to like this one. What are your thoughts on Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. I first fell in love with it as a song when I had gotten Bad Out of Hell 2 from the library, and I don't know, I kind of had the album on the background in general maybe, but then when this one, I know it's early on the album, but maybe I listened to it once through and didn't really soak a whole lot of it up, and then when I maybe put it back on again and heard this one, it kind of just ended up being one of the only songs I listened to for like the rest of the week that I had that rented from the library. I just really loved it and would put it on repeat a lot. I do agree with Jamie's comment. I love the bass on that version. I just think overall that version's awesome. And then when I heard the original Bad for Good version, I really like that one too. I maybe slightly lean towards the original, but they're both great versions. It's out of all the Meatloaf versions of these songs that he's done, this one might be my favorite of his versions of them. In fact, there are even some versions that he did that kind of disappointed me. But so both versions are great of this one. I didn't realize how awesome the sax solo in the original version is until I was listening to it recently because of you, Greg, in these podcasts. I didn't realize how truncated that is on the Meatloaf version. You get so much more sax on the original, and that's super sweet. I do really dig the a cappella ending. It's just a great song. I mean, even just right when you look at the title, it's like, the classic phrase is that dreams come true, and it's just a slight twist on that. They come through, and it does connect with me, kind of like you were saying, Greg, that kid in Kansas, like just rock and roll coming through for you when you need it. And I dig some of the extra things surrounding, rock music, like just, the chicks and the partying and just like the coolness and everything. That's all great, but at the core of it, I'm really just a guy who loves rock music, like genuinely loves rock music. I've literally been that kid, like with the covers pulled over his head, listening to music on my Discman with headphones. Like that stuff just really does resonate with me. And this is a great song to exemplify that. And on the note of, you were mentioning earlier with, this is one that Rory sings and Jim would have to like lip sync it for stuff like Top of the Pops. I was curious, Greg, with you knowing so much about Jim Steinman and this album and everything, why didn't he just either sing the whole album himself or just be like, hey, Rory, I think you're a better singer. Why don't you just be my Meatloaf for this album and you sing the whole thing yourself? Why was it the mix of the two of them?
So I've never gotten a direct answer on that. All I have is a theory, and I think a lot of it comes down to Todd Rundgren being kind of a dick. And let me explain. Todd Rundgren is very blunt, straightforward, and is willing to tell you suck if he thinks you suck. And he doesn't take bullshit. So I imagine since he co-produced this with Jim, he probably pushed Jim very hard as a vocalist, and it probably took Jim a while to get these takes. And I think with the ballads that Rory sang, I think it just wasn't working for Jim to sing them. I think he would try, and it just wasn't up to snuff. And that's why Rory sang. But then I think Jim really got into it because he said he loves working with Rory as a vocalist and likes people interpreting his work. So I think it started off as a negative, but then I think Jim got excited about it and actively wanted to utilize Rory once he decided he was going to, is my suspicion. But I mean, I've never directly asked about that. But that's my suspicion as to why it ended up the way it did. And then probably why, it's a bit of a burn with the Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through thing where, Rory was gracious enough to sing on the album, for his friend, and then just being pushed to the side when it came to the single promotion. That's just, all just conjecture on my part, but that's kind of how I see everything going down.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting take and a valid take, definitely, with your background knowledge of all of it.
And the one thing I want to say, comparing this to the Meatloaf version, this one definitely has more energy. The Meatloaf version definitely feels a little bit more adult contemporary than this, versus this just feels like a classic, 70s pop song. Any other comments on Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through before we move on?
I like that you're describing the two major versions of the song called Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through as pop and adult contemporary.
I mean, look, this isn't that hard or heavy of a song.
It's not hard rock dreams come through. It's not heavy metal dreams come through.
Look, it's like Brad could have covered this song.
An adult contemporary is tough to fit in the meter.
Where's the Mayhem version of this song?
I'd listen to that. The Amon Amarth covering this song.
That would actually be pretty great.
I mean, really, we're just figuring out all the artists who should cover Jim Steinman. We're figuring it out for each track.
I mean, sort of the trick is, I'm pretty sure if I named any band in the world, you'd be like, oh yeah, they should cover some Steinman.
All right, test that.
Yeah, I would say, who is it that you don't... What's the band that you don't like at all? Oh, Nirvana. You don't like Nirvana. You think Nirvana should... I mean,
know
it's gonna
what?
be hard now that Kurt's dead, but
Well, so you're
Imagine Kurt and Courtney doing "Dance in My Pants."
hell yeah.
that's actually tremendous.
Oh, I want that.
I think you just sold me on that. That's amazing. And the thing is, because like he's kind of a shitty guitar player, like that would just be a mess. That'd be a train wreck, and it'd be a beautiful train wreck.
I got some moves that you haven't seen before.
When you were saying it like that sounded more like Billy Corgan, so I kind of want Billy Corgan to do it now.
Oh hell yeah!
Billy Corgan and Courtney Love.
He's already kind of done Steinman-esque songs. Like Tonight is just a really short Steinman song.
All right, which Steinman song should Gojira cover?
Let's see. Hold on. You know what? I'm thinking Bad for Good.
The sea is whipping the sky.
Speaking of that, is Bad for Good next? What's next?
Bad for Good is not next.